Hello, everybody. This is John Matheson. Take 3 of video 15, which is the second one on ancient Roman law. The first one is video 14. So there's two other factors that we need to consider when we think of all of the influences on lawmaking in Rome. And the first one is the College of Pontiffs. There were 5 pontiffs, and the one who was lowest in rank actually had the ability to appoint all the others. And he was called the Pontifex Maximus. The most important one, as far as the people were concerned, was the Rex Rex Sacrorum, and he was the king of the sacred. And being chosen by the Pontifex Maximus, the Rex Sacrorum had to do a lot of ceremonial and religious duties that the king did before the consuls took over Rome and in the Republic. So the thing that you always hear about the pontiffs is that they were mainly a religious group. And yes, they were. However, once you have figured out all of those things to do, you've got a lot of other things to think about. And one of the things that the College of Pontiffs did, they also advised the king or the emperor or the consul on the law. So there was yet another advisory council that didn't actually have much legislative authority, but the people in charge would talk to them as they had all the religious law and traditions and so forth to find out how that would be interpreted and forth. So that's the pontiffs. Pontifex Maximus is a term that may be familiar to some people these days, and was a great advisor to the person in charge in Rome. The second thing we cannot go by without mentioning is the 12 tables. And what happened after the consuls took over from the kings was that the magistrates, the people, the justices, could only come from the patrician class. And that made the plebeians, who were the working people, very angry because they weren't able to put their own people in as judges as well. And 450 BCE or BC, it was decided to appoint the Decemviri, or 10 men who were going to make sort of a civil code for Rome. It's not exactly in the format of a civil code, but it was basically a code of laws that were going to be displayed in bronze that everybody could go and look at and learn the law. Common law for the public. And the legend is, that's what Livy wrote anyway. He said they went to Greece, or they went to Greek cities in the southern part of Italy and got the ideas from there. But that idea is being more and more discredited as time goes by. And we don't really know if there's any kind of organic link between Athenian law and Roman law. Or I don't think there's a very good way to do comparisons. And one would think that perhaps they tried to sort them out, and there was some categories that they had in the 12 tables that were supposed to categorize laws into different groups, although they're not in the same order that we would have in the civil code. So the first one was procedure. How do you get somebody to court? The next one was more about procedure. That was table 2, and theft. Then 3, debt. And 4, the rights of the father in a family, pater familias. 5 was guardianship and inheritance. And yes, we do see paterfamilias joined with guardianship and inheritance, which is generally family, and that tends to stick together in the civil law. We also have acquisition and possession, which goes down to property, which is the next sort of category in civil law. Then we have land rights and crimes against land. um, what to do if you kill your neighbor's animals or something like that. And then in Book 8 are laws of injuries, or what you might call torts and delicts, what to do about all of those. Number 9 was public law, and number 10 was religious law. And those were the first 10 tables, and they did those, but they realized that they needed another 2 tables. So at 450, they did the 10 tables, and then they appointed another 10 men, the Decemviri again, to make the additional 2 tables. And number 11 seems to be no marriages between plebeians and patricians. So maybe it was the patricians who wanted that one put in. And the 12th one had the interesting principle that whatever the people had last ordained should be held as binding by law, or you can say that another way, that new laws take precedence over old laws. So it's interesting. We have a lot of legal principles that we still hold on to today, although not quite in the same order. The one thing that's interesting is that the crime of perjury, which is also a death penalty offense in the Torah, it's actually says in Hebrew, it says not to make false testimony, which is definitely a court matter. And for perjury, you get hurled from the Tarpeian Rock for lying in court. So, and perjury, even in Canada now, I think they can give you up to 14 years for that. So, perjury in the Torah, perjury in Rome, perjury in Canadian criminal code, it seems to be considered still to be an extremely serious offense. And then in number 9, we have crimes in the administration of justice, which in the Canadian Criminal Code is Part 4, but it's in Table 9, that if you're a judge that takes a bribe to change a sentence, that's a capital crime. That's also death penalty. And I think it's Section 119 of the Criminal Code, where that's a 14-year sentence as well for that kind of crime. And in that section is also treason, and also an interesting law that is forbidden to kill an unconvicted man or woman, I suppose. And that means they're already bringing in the principle of innocent until proven guilty, although it isn't specifically enumerated in that format. There's another interesting one about common law marriages, although it's somewhat more brutally expressed. But if a man lives with a woman for a year, and there are no periods where there's 3 days where they're not together, that's assumed to be a marriage in law. And unfortunately, because it's a patriarchal society, it means that the man gets possession of the woman after the 1 year. So, and the other sexist thing is that the females remain in guardianship to their parents until they get married. So even if you reach the age of majority, if your parents aren't dead, you're still owned by your father. So that is the Pontiffs, the College of Pontiffs, and the 12 Tables of Law, which seem to be a very interesting model for civil codes, which are still in existence in many parts of the world. Even the Japanese took on a civil code because they felt that they could compete better in this world with this. And there's civil codes all over the world. And there's also a German flavor of civil code, which came up through what's called the Lex Salica through King Clovis in around 500 AD. And then the one that I'm reading is called the Corpus Juris Civilis, which was done when Rome was in Constantinople, and that was done by Justinian and Theodora, as I mentioned before. So they tried to collect all the laws and put them in a big book. And that's sort of basically the process of civil law. But of course, it's subject to amendment because they can always come up with laws that are better than the ones before, or that eliminate a bunch of them, or have to deal with new things. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that.